Actually, you're good. It doesn't cast as heavy, so you're actually good. Me, I was like, well, y'all gonna see this, very Negro moment of a picture of myself. Because for me, I'm like, this is something Black people do that people don't understand. I was like, this is very peak Black culture. If anyone wants to discuss that at a later date, they can. But I was like, no, Black people have pictures of themselves. They do have pictures of family, but there are large images of themselves in their own homes. That tells you all you need to know about Black people. Yeah, it's true. It's true, though. Anyway, thank you for joining the podcast. I think, if I had known about you sooner, I don't know what. There are times where I'm like, I'm interviewing all these women and I don't know what I've been doing this whole time because I didn't know about any of this. But I was sitting in on that Philly Soul Food event they were doing for La Dame, and there was a handful of ladies who were like, yeah, we were doing some research and we just discovered, a couple of things like, the Horticulture magazine. And I was like, so they're it's so interesting to me that you still have these very small pockets in major cities of like no one knows what the other person is doing. So it was just like, okay, so y'all didn't know any of that, huh? And they were like, yeah, I think I know who Clancy is. And I'm just like, well, y'all got a list of magazines you need to get. I was like, I need y'all to get Wild Entertaining. I need you to go ahead and get Horticulture. I need you to go ahead and get Whetstone. And they were like, oh. I was like, we out here, y'all. We out here. I'm sorry we didn't tell you sooner, but we out here.
We're out here.
We are really out here right now. But I just appreciate so much of what you do. I know, I have yet to introduce my mom to the brand yet because I want you to be prepared before I do that. She got peak Black mom energy.
I love it. That's all I need.
It's that thing where everything is a yes and okay, and it's just a lot of we'll tell her that and it's like they give you personal messages to give to people you don't know. So,
I want to receive all of them.
So I was like, I'm gonna prepare her first because you will never forget the day that my mom gets in contact and be like, well, let her know that I'd like to talk to her about, does she want to write a book? I mean, just all the things, all my mom's side hustles come into play. It's fantastic. But I
can't wait for it.
But if you are not prepared, you'll be like,
oh.
I was like, I'm sorry. Especially for people who don't have Black moms. I'm like, most of Black people I know are like, my mom do the same thing. But if you have a non-Black mom, you have no idea that this lady will have her
prepared. Yeah.
That you in the prayer chain, in the prayer circle. She got friends who got questions. I love it.
And all the friends order at the same time.
Just like, mom, relax. Please don't do that. But she has long been a person who loves entertaining it at home, and like she used to teach like charm classes and stuff like that, and she's big on like etiquette and table manners and all the things. And I think it was like when I first started connecting to like While Entertaining, I was just like, okay, this is the like classic energy people need. I think in our efforts to be modern, we lose how to like be people. And so I felt like that was like, and I'm big on like eating at home with people and like inviting people into your house. And for anybody who has done that, we know what it's like to be like, I'm never eating there. Please don't invite me to your house no more.
So such and such is not that good.
Girl. So it's like to give people instruction, because I think their intentions are good. But a lot of times the execution is lost because they're like, well, I didn't know I needed to do that. I was like, well, what we can't do is have you putting gravy in a Solo cup and then go ahead and go to the thrift store and get you a real gravy boat. There's plenty of them over there. Like, it's just those little small details. And again, like, I think because Black culture has had to work so hard to get everything, those micro details get lost because we just don't have like the bandwidth or the access or the resources to like fill those things in. And so reminding people like, yes, it's important. Like you want to go, even if you don't have time now, you want to go back and revisit like the little micro details because they mean something. So yes, so thank you for like taking up space in this way because I appreciate it. I mean,
I appreciate you saying that. And thank you for
because
having me to chat today.
girl, I mean, because I have questions, I have things, because I tell people, look, there's plenty of information on the internet about people, and I have. If you have to like come on the podcast and you're expecting those details, I can't help you because I'm not here for the things you can Google. I just have no interest in that. But what I do is give my guests space to introduce themselves. I find that has a greater impact to allow people to tell their own stories in their own way, and bring emphasis to the things that's important to them. And then, of course, me encouraging people to say their own names has just like it started like by the third episode in I was just like this is really important. Black women being able to say their own names with a level of like power and authenticity, especially in a space where everything even down to our names is problematic for people and they want to like they want to mispronounce it.
Shorten
Even the most
it.
simple name, they want to add extra syllables and things. You're like, okay, so you know how you say Tiffany in white worlds? Same way. No different because I'm Black. There's no extra syllables on account of that. And so I remember dealing with that as a kid and they would like, so how do you say your name? And you're just like, so either you're rude or you're stupid, but neither one works out. So it's Tiffany. Like, oh, like the regular Tiffany. Yes, like the regular. So
And
so
who
yes,
gets to decide what is regular?
girl,
But that's another territory.
it's a whole different podcast. So I will give you the floor to like introduce yourself and like give us your name, give us some milestones in your journey and like the things you want to highlight about about how you got where you are right now. And then usually I have questions, follow-up questions on that alone, and I don't know if we ever really get into any other questions outside of that. But, I'm gonna try. So I'm gonna mute myself. So because I know there's gonna be a ambulance at any moment now in these streets. So anytime you're ready, you can go for it.
Okay, well, hello everyone. My name is Amber Mayfield, Amber Ann Mayfield, and depending on what side of the family you're on, Amber Ann is how you pronounce it. I am the founder of To Be Hosted, which is a food-focused events agency based in New York that specializes in dinner parties and really intimate experiences that elevate Black culture in the production of them. And I am also the founder of While Entertaining Magazine, which is an annual magazine that highlights Black food and beverage producers and then provides you with resources and inspiration for when you're cooking and gathering at home. So I got into this career actually when I was 23. I was working in television and I was a corporate assistant and I was just in a really crazy environment. And what I noticed is that all of these events and all of these productions included the same 5 caterers, the same lighting people, the same designers, the same artists, and none of them really looked like me. And that really bothered me. So I was like, what?
That's a no for me. That's a no for me.
Right. So I started To Be Hosted as a side hustle and it was self-funded. And I really wanted to like host these dinner parties that would put chefs and catering businesses that I was really excited about in front of Black creatives and Black professionals and just create a really intimate experience and safe experience for us to dine. I'm sure all of us, especially in New York, have no shortage of stories of not feeling comfortable in certain spaces and not feeling like that fine dining experience or that luxury experience or wherever you want to go and feel like somebody is specifically catering to and thinking about you. I felt like we didn't have that. So I made that and it was a wild ride. And now we kind of have shifted from the supper club model to just producing these events for different corporations like the ones that I started at to really just diversify their vendor list, diversify their agency list and do dope and exciting things that put, again, Black culture right at the front of them. So that's why I fell in love with events and hosting and food events specifically. And as I was going on, I was like, okay, well, my dinners are small. It's about like 20 to 25 people each time. So I was like, how do I scale that? And this is like 2019. And I was like, maybe the way to do that is a magazine and really give people the game on what I'm doing
I
at these
mean,
dinners and who I want to work with and why I want to work with them and why their stories are so great. So that's where the annual magazine came from. And it was another self-funded endeavor.
always.
And that's just how it was. And, because I was new and I was young and nobody really knew me, but I had this vision and I brought it to a couple of people and I was like, will you sign on to this? Will you do this? And they were like, yes. So right ahead of the pandemic in March 2020, we launched our first issue and it was digital because our printer closed when the rest of New York closed.
Wow. Okay.
But it was out there and it started
Yeah.
to, get its little momentum. And now we've got our second issue in print and it's really getting its little momentum and its little shine. But I mean, hopefully it has brought people, new stories and also comfort when they're in the house and just like need inspiration or need someone to relate to. They can like open our publications and be like, oh yeah, I want to sit with them.
Yeah. Because they usually do anyway. They just don't know why, but now they can articulate it. They be like, I want to sit with all the Black kids in the cafeteria because they all seem to be having fun. I'm like, yeah, you're right. We are.
Well,
it's true. Do you have like memories of like your mother, your grandmother, your aunts, your father, like people in your family, like really putting on those types of events and those types of dinners? 'Cause I know my mom sure did. She was like, New Year's Eve.
Yes, I mean, it was two people. It was my mom and it was my grandmother. And my grandmother always had these little details and touches that stuck out to me. And her home in New Jersey just became this meeting place for all of the cousins. And there was always something really good in the kitchen. And it wasn't too overdone. And that's kind of something that guides me as much as I like the frills. I'm like, what are the approachable frills that people can do and make the people that are coming over feel special without feeling like, ooh, I can't break this.
I mean, the plastic covered furniture, the rooms you can't go into that are fully set up for company and you have to go to the basement. Yeah.
Those. Yep. Yeah. So between my grandmother just having this like meeting place of home and just feeling like you were there to be taken care of. And then my mom always loved hosting like the barbecues here at our house. And it was just a place to have some really good food and just really good camaraderie. And I just loved that. Yeah. I grew up, I'm actually at home as we are recording this at my parents' house as we're recording this. In this town, it's called Nanuet, New York. And it was not very diverse. There was about 4 or 5 Black families at the time that I was going through my school age years.
Wow.
So my house just became this meeting place that like, I had like 4 Black girlfriends and then just so happened to have like half of them had brothers that were also my brother's age.
Nice.
So this was the spot.
That sounds about right. Mm-hmm.
So, and I just something about food and gathering and being home and this being like our safe space or, their other houses being our safe space. Those were the moments that I just cherished so much.
I love it.
If I was going to my friend's house that was Jamaican, I knew I was getting something good. If I was going to my friend's house that was Asian, I was getting something good. If they were coming here, they knew my mom had the best ribs. Like, so we were like house hopping and eating, and it just, those were the moments that were super exciting.
Oh yeah. I miss that a lot. I mean, I don't know where it went, why it went, but I do really miss that. Like our next door neighbors to our immediate, because I lived in South Jersey. I grew up in South Jersey, so we lived in row homes. And so our immediate neighbor was like Haitian, and then the neighbors next to that were Jamaican, and the neighbors next to that were Puerto Rican, and the neighbors next to that was this really nice old Black lady. And then and then you just kept going, and our neighborhood was actually, like, thinking about it, was super diverse. We even had some white people who lived in our neighborhood because our neighborhood was primarily a Black neighborhood. And so it was like, that was unusual. Considering the time period, it was just kind of like you had a real toss up of what could happen. And so that we lived across the street from like a park with a tennis court. It was very strange. So you're like, so people would come to our house and be like, I don't understand what's happening here. I'm like, you're right. Because they would, like, we had friends, like my parents, most of their friends either came from church or my dad's job or my mom's job. And we a lot of times their friends were white. Like most of their friends were either like Jewish or Italian, and like every now and again, like my mom had more Black friends because of the neighborhood we went in, and she was a cosmetologist for almost 40 years. So most of her clients were Black women. And so that's the reason why we had like that kind of mix. But when it came to events, those folks who lived out in like the burbs would drive into like this very urban area of New Jersey and just kind of like, yeah, we're going to this party. And my mom would be, I mean, house was done and decked out and ready to go. And I was just like, these white people gonna really drive here? And okay, all right, well, cool
They're here
then,
for
right?
it.
You right. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
we had, it's not like we had this huge refrigerator. So eventually I think my mom bought like a freezer for our basement. So like there's just bigger and bigger capacities to hold more and more food. And then of course the introduction of like BJ's Warehouse and Sam's Club and stuff, you couldn't tell black people nothing.
Yeah.
You could buy what in bulk
for their summer party.
It was like, well,
I know we got some more of that in the basement.
that was the thing. But I really do miss being able to like go to a neighbor's house. It's just I don't know when that little bit just kind of dissipated in society, but it's like it's such an essential, I think it was such an essential part of like socialization. So like that gap right now of like not, I mean, there's just people, there's a generation of people unfortunately that don't have these social skills that we just, I don't know if we had the choice. Like, if you grew up the way I grew up, and like most people, like most black people I know, if you walked into a room, if you walked into a house and it was a relative's house and you didn't speak, that was 20 years off your life. I just, I'm sorry, did you come in here and not speak to nobody? And you just like, hello. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, no, people think I'm so like, pre-COVID, and like I would go to like a friend's house party and I would say hello to everybody when I came in, and the women would look at me like,
okay.
I was like, if I don't speak to you, that's worse.
Like somehow my ancestors will know I didn't speak and this is not going to go well.
Yeah.
I just...
No.
I really do miss that. It's like super nostalgic. And it's like, I love the fact that you're trying to capture that and like reintroduce that to people. I don't know if people even know they should miss it, because there's like, that space of time where, okay, well, I didn't grow up that way. You're just like, really? Because we all did.
Can implement it now.
Oh yeah, and that's why I'm like, well, let's reintroduce that business right now and see how much richer your life can be, see how much richer your relationships can be. It's funny, I was watching an interview with Morgan DeBron, the founder of Blavity and like Afrotech, and one thing I had noted is that when Black women's stories are covered, like how we come to a place, because they were talking about how she ended up getting like $12 million in funding for Blavity to launch Blavity. And, a lot of times the way they edit and piece her story together, you don't really know about her story. You don't understand the whole thing. Like you don't know, like, oh, she was an early investor in like Facebook and Tesla. You didn't know she graduated at the top of her class in college. So they really do kind of extract a lot about our journeys. And so like what I try to lean into a lot here in this space is to kind of dig into some of those micro moments for people. And so they understand like Black women aren't just like bootstrapping their way into these spaces. There's some real decisions being made, and we're deliberate about those things. So in the spirit of that, what did you, because both of those projects, the magazine and the event brand, were self-funded. Like, what did that process look like for you? What were some of like the harder decisions you had to make for yourself? Were there things you had to let go of that you like now are trying to recapture, and you like, okay, now I have the space, the bandwidth, or the resources to do that one specific thing I wanted to do at the beginning?
Yes, there's so many things. So in the beginning, it was like a really interesting journey too, because first I was working in television, and then I was working for a hospitality group. Alongside all of this, I was also working on my master's degree in marketing. I think I always like to call out my age, because I was 23, and not just because I was young, but also because I had the luxury of like still being on my parents' insurance and still having 2 roommates. So I was living in a Harlem high rise, and I wasn't paying more than $800 with utilities included. So it was like the perfect time to get scrappy and quit my corporate job and really like pour love into this, in addition to pouring funding into it, because I really believed it was a thing that needed to exist. So it was, there were times that I wouldn't go to brunch with all of my friends, or there were times that like, if somebody really insisted that I come to brunch, they were going to cover me.
Look, I'm like, I hope you have coins for this, because I can't go without a donation.
Exactly. Like I was like, this $50 is going towards my Squarespace
Yeah.
page. It is not going towards this brunch. So if
Girl.
you want me to, I'm gonna need you to spot me and just trust me on what I'm doing
Oh,
here. It'll all make sense one
let me tell
day.
you something. That Squarespace comment resonates in my spirit. 'Cause,
You know?
like, I'm sorry, these $45 need to go towards my Squarespace website.
Yes,
Oh, that's
yes.
real. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Mhm.
And I started with this Squarespace page, and eventually, To Be Hosted went from like doing these supper club style dinners to now being like a full service events agency. And within, so that was 2017. So within 3 years, pre-pandemic, we went from like doing supper clubs to doing events for corporations like Netflix and Bullet
Wow.
Whiskey and Equinox and Nestle, and it was gamed. Like all of that work then made sense, and then I got a designer to do my website that exists now. It's
Oh, it's
beautiful.
wonderful, isn't it? I'm just like, y'all don't understand what it's like to finally be able to get like, okay, I have resources that I can now pass certain tasks off so I get more bandwidth
Mm-hmm.
back to do like to push this thing forward and to have better ideas and to like kind of manifest the big
Expand
ideas.
my creativity.
Exactly.
Yes.
Now, for
Yes.
and this is fun, it's funny because it was a segue into my next question. That first,
Mm-hmm.
those clients that, like Netflix and Nestle, like what did that look like? Because I think one thing I'm noticing specifically with like young people, because I had to do a workshop with like the food and finance high school, and then I have some other like high school age folks who are right now, like I'm teaching them about how to package their story so they can deliver it when the time comes, when it counts. So like for a future employer, if they're trying to pitch an idea to get funding, whatever that looks like. And I'm like, but not being able to tell your story and ask for what you need is a skill that most people don't learn. You learn by trial and error, like getting enough
Mm-hmm.
no's or not, or getting the thing you didn't want because you didn't communicate clearly what you needed. And so this idea of like, there's a lot of young people who have these big ideas and aspirations, and like there's this learning gap of, if
Mm-hmm.
you don't have a lot of the privileges that your non-black counterparts have, where your parents know certain people in certain circles, so you don't ever really have to do the ask part. It's just that, hey, oh, my mom knows so and so, or my dad knows so and they're going to ask for me,
Mm-hmm.
or they came to my high school graduation and wanted to see what I was going to do with my future, and so now they're like, well, what do you need? So we don't have that access a lot of times, and so we do have to like
Mm-hmm.
frame and pitch ourselves to these potential clients. So for someone who's like, hey, I'd love to get a bigger book of business, to have
Mm-hmm.
better conversations or bigger conversations with larger clientele, what did those first few conversations look like? What was your process for like contacting and getting these folks on the
Yes.
list?
Okay, so there are two really important parts of this. So I think the first part for me is I like to level set for people that like when I started my career, did you ever watch 30 Rock?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so do you remember Kenneth the
Hmm.
Page? That's a real program at NBC, and I was in it. And they choose like 100 kids out of tens of thousands that
Wow.
applied. So that was one of my first jobs out of college. So once I was there, and it's like such a big networking system, that's how I got my first job in television. And that's how I got to like bounce around to all these different areas of a business to really understand how they work
Mm.
and who gets to do well there. And of course, there are very problematic things that were going on, but like I like to add that layer of like, I had
Yeah.
access.
Yeah.
So I had a leg up in that regard.
Gotcha.
But then after like learning to speak the language and like, being the intern, being the page, being the assistant and soaking up all of this information, I'm also like the daughter of two teachers. So I was going to, the lectures after work or whatever talk that I could go to.
Yeah.
Like if it's a marketing person or an ads person or a social media person or PR person, I was learning about all of these tricks and
Yep.
trades because like, with To Be Hosted in the beginning, I was like, the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. So I couldn't just go and plan events. I had to learn everything that was around
Yeah. Oh
it.
yeah.
So that foundation helped me first of like, okay, this is how brands like to be communicated to with these decks. They need to see this type of information in the deck, like the about us, the why, how we choose our vendors, what our approach is, why our approach is unique. They like to see photos and videos. So like, the same way I was saving $50 for Squarespace, I was saving like $100 to like get a photographer that was good and get a videographer that was good, because them being able to see my work was also like the great equalizer of like, okay, it's not just like another pitch that we're getting, but like, this is what it looks like. And this is how people respond to it. And like, it's dipped in culture. It's dripping in culture. We want to be there. So that part was like the next piece of like collecting all of these assets, but then also recognizing where you are in your journey. So when I started in 2017, I was doing supper clubs, and the first supper club was filled with my friends. And I was like, okay, what did I get right? What did I get wrong? And then I spent like the next year and a half doing a bunch of dinner parties and doing a ton of things wrong and learning lessons the really, really hard way. Like I can go through a long laundry list
like,
of,
this is not it.
Horror stories. Yeah. And people who worked with me in the early days were like, Amber, I never want to do it that way again. I'm like, heard you. We'll fix it. But those moments were really important to learn before I was even pitching my agency as somebody that can execute these like grand dinner parties for all of these other events.
That's good.
So I spent like a year and a half between like 2017 and then 2019 was when I like booked all of my biggest clients. I think that was much shorter for me because of that part I mentioned in the beginning. But I feel like it's, don't despise those small beginnings. Do it a little ratchet at the beginning, figure it out, perfect it, because it expands your mind. You get more creative with money when you don't have any. So then now that we're taking on these like bigger projects with these bigger budgets, I can do a lot with them.
Now see, I'm gonna be like,
I was doing it with nothing.
It's true. It's funny because I've been thinking about like since last summer, thinking about this idea, especially when we started talking about like white privilege, and that kind of came really big into the conversation. And the very obvious expressions of white privilege were like kind of in play, and everybody could point to them and like really see them. But there was like this one like really micro space that people kind of neglect, and it's this you get access to fail. You get access for that. There's a privilege in like being able to fail, get it wrong, and then get back up and do it again and do it again and do it again, because there are some spaces where you do have like unlimited resources to screw it up. So go ahead.
And to that point, Black people and minority people don't have access to fail once they get the big client. So like by the time I got there, I was like, I know that the qualifying pieces, I only get one chance. And if I mess this up, even now, if I mess something up, if it's disastrous, if somebody gets massively sick or whatever the thing may be, that will be my downfall, because we don't yet have a society that gives us grace. So you need to be ready for your moment.
And I'd like
and it's the unfortunate reality.
And you giving me all these little tweetable moments here too. So we got you can get real creative with money when you don't have any. You need to be prepared for for your moments.
Yes.
I think that's like something I've been really paying attention to in the last year too, as I watch, and it's so moving to watch like Black people go, okay, in the pandemic where I don't have my job right now, I'm going to get really creative or take these really big risks and just like go for the thing I've always wanted to do. And it's like, you're excited for them. And, simultaneously having started something before and having to figure out how to get it up and successful, you also know there's that moment that's coming where that first failure shows up, and you want to be able to like hold that person in the space. And so I'm like trying to figure out like collectively, how can we hold each other, because we don't get opportunities to fail. We don't get access to failure. We don't get privilege to fail. We have to get it right the first time. And not only do you have to get it right the first time, it has to be incredible. You got to be out here doing like Beyonce on Netflix.
And circus trips on dinner tables.
I mean, it has to be that level good in order for people to go, oh, okay, yeah, I guess they're to be validated, not even to be like promoted even. It's just one of those things to get entry. You have to be insanely good at what you've done. And so I've been thinking a lot about like, how do we like hold space for each other that way? And like, okay, it's okay if you fail. There's there's has to be some type of like safeguard at some point for Black folks as we start to like take these risks and do bigger things. And whether that's monetarily, which is a big part of it, like, okay, if this, this brand failed or this project failed and I want to try it again because I learned so much the first time, but I don't have the resources or the public trust to do it. And so like around that conversation of like, because I knew last year it was going to come up, and how like Black people need to support Black businesses. Because while we are saying it in like a social media space and trying to like tell white people, okay, you need to support Black businesses, Black people have failed each other. If we're going to be honest, we have failed each other in that way too. Because a lot of times we'll like, I'm not going to use that company no more. Or I'm not going to go there no more. Now, look, I'm not talking about hair appointments where you done shown up and your stylist is 3 hours late. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like legitimately, like there is a tea shop in your neighborhood. There is a local hair supply that's owned by a little Black lady or something. Like all of those businesses that we are talking about, like we want these to exist. We need these to be here. We need to buy the block and stuff like that. I'm like, well, when we own some of the block, you didn't go. So the block closed. So it's like this conversation of like, if you go into a restaurant, a Black owned restaurant, and you have a really challenging experience with service or whatever it's going to be, with food, with consistency, with timing, there has to be, I think there's a way that we can approach this, that we can like hold people to a standard and at the same time allow them to make those mistakes. Because I think you do get defensive after a lot of people tell you like, hey, I had a terrible experience here, where your wait staff is rude or whatever it is. And you get defensive and you don't really hear that critique anymore. And, when you start to read about like, major restaurant, like these huge, like very notable restaurants having these hard ass critiques from these critics, and they are kind of like, okay, we're either going to learn the lesson and like pivot and do better, or we're going to not say anything and just keep our heads down and keep working. And Black businesses don't get that space, and we don't hold them in that way when, there's criticism to be had. It's like, yes, you could be providing a better service, but I want to be able to give you that critique and you not feel like it's a personal attack. And girl.
Yes. And that, I feel like it's so hard, and I don't know the solution to this, because it's a society issue as well, of like, there's only one seat at the table for this particular type of person, and that particular type of person can't fail, right? Like that's the energy that society gives us, so we end up giving it to each other. So I think it's making, for me, I can only speak for myself. For me, it's making a conscious effort to like treat everybody like my family. So my approach, like if it's a vendor that I don't have a great experience with or like what have you, I'd rather just shoot them a note and just be like, hey, this happened. I really love that you did this, but this kind of fell off. I know that's not how you want it to go. Just wanted to give you a heads up because I love everything about y'all. And that's kind of like the end of it. Like it's not on social media. It's not the thing that, like I have no problem writing to vendor and be like, by the way, I think you changed like your shipper and your shipper did X, Y, and Z and it's going to make you look crazy. And they'll say, thank you. Like I feel like, it's biblical. God corrects the ones that he loves. So if we are just committed to loving each other, it's me showing you love to tell you that like your eyelash is hanging off. You know what I mean? And I want y'all to show me the same love. Like if
I was like, you need chapstick. Just thought you should know. Like, don't be out here crusty lips.
If I'm doing something crazy, tell me. Let me help you. Let me service you in that way. But I don't if I don't know that it's happening, and you let me go outside the doors of the house looking some sort of way. That's the kind of, we have to just position ourselves to like, that's the kind of love that we want to receive. And then also for people who are building brands, I think it's really, if you think about these top brands and these household names, like even like restaurants aside, but we could even use restaurants as an example. Like the average person does not know the person that made McDonald's and Wendy's and Chick-fil-A.
Exactly.
But their legacy is going on. So if you're building a business, do you want that business to supersede your identity? So then you, the human, are not receiving this feedback. The brand is receiving this feedback. So what are you going to do to fix it? And so it's a mind shift if that's, what you want to build
Oh,
is, don't
absolutely.
take it personal. Like, I think businesses and I think food businesses and I think myself, like I am a service provider. I provide a
Yeah.
service. I provide a service to my events people. I provide a service to the people who buy my magazines. If you're not happy, then I am not doing my
Right.
job. So you got to let me know so I can service you.
That's good. I love that
So yeah,
idea
that's.
of like learning how to separate yourself from your brand, whereas you're,
Mm-hmm,
whatever you do is in service to the brand, so it's its own entity, it's its own thing, it sits outside of you, so that it does have an
mm-hmm,
opportunity to become a legacy brand. I mean, most of the brands that we engage
mm-hmm,
with now have outlived their founders, and it's just, the
mm-hmm.
brand is its
And you get mad at the brand, not
girl,
the
and it's its
founder.
own thing now too. It's not, it has, the brands have their own personalities, they have their own growth patterns, and they might be different than yourself. Like when we think about major brands like Apple, or who else is leaving their company right now or stepping down, Amazon. So when you think about their founders
Mm-hmm,
stepping away from the brand in like a very active role, so you've got Jeff Bezos who's leaving the one position and getting into a less active position in the
mm-hmm.
Amazon brand, and then you had Steve Jobs, who first was fired from Apple and then stepped away from Apple, and then I can't remember his name, the CEO for Starbucks. I mean, he has stepped away twice at this point and retired his
Mm-hmm,
position as
mm-hmm,
CEO, and reduced his amount of activity in the branding of something. So it's
mm-hmm,
just like to think about that moment. Like I think I'm always working towards that. Like if I'm building a brand, I always am working towards that space where that brand can have autonomy, and it's not
mm-hmm,
necessarily me doing anything anymore. I'm in service to it, but there's an entire team of
mm-hmm.
people in service to that brand now, and it's not
In
just,
service, yeah.
I'm not synonymous with it anymore. And I do think we
Mm-hmm,
do, specifically Black women, because we tend to be the faces of our brands for a long time, because we have to bootstrap them suckers, and they're self-funded, and all of those things. So we are like, biologically attached to these brands we're building because we've spent so much time with them and they're that important.
mm-hmm,
But there's a moment where we do have to go, okay, when can I like kind of set this thing free and allow other people to,
mm-hmm.
contribute, to allow other people to
Right.
contribute like ideas, and what direction we can go in, and those types of things. And I think that's the one of the harder things in a space where like Black people don't get to own very much. When
Mm-hmm.
we do have these ideas that are great and they are very successful, it's really hard to just kind of go, okay, this can live in its own way and do its own thing, and I can move on to something else. I can go create something new, which is like the advantage to being able to let your brand go a little bit. Um,
Mm-hmm.
around the branding for the magazine, what was the inspiration for that, like outside of the people featured in it? Like what did you have a vision of what it would look like? Because I think for me, I that's how I kind of process certain ideas, is like I have an actual vision of like, okay, this is going to be the final product, this is going to be the final outcome. So for that, did you see something you had already that was like, you know what, yeah, that's what I need this to look like? Or was it one of those kind of I crossed the bridge as I was building it type of situations?
um, it was a little bit of both. Like, I feel like in terms of vision, like I have a very clear vision of like what I want While Entertaining to
Mm,
become, which is this destination for modern multicultural home hosting and food and culture. So I can like see very clearly where we're going. But it was hard to find something to like model it after because it was so specific. Like I really wanted to
yeah.
have this like editorial and cookbook hybrid.
Ooh.
I really wanted to be a coffee table book that's like incredibly functional. I really wanted stories that were like not just the top chefs or the chefs with the most followers or talking about whichever restaurant. I wanted to talk to Black people who are making food at whatever stage they were in their
Mm,
career. So I didn't have something to model it after, and that's how I knew that I was doing the right thing. Like I feel like it sits in its own categories, and now my challenge is to make sure everybody understands like what that
yeah.
category is. Like most people get our magazine and they're like, whoa.
What am I looking at right
I
now?
was like, I knew you were doing something. I didn't know
Doing
you were
that,
doing
yeah.
this. So now it's really trying to like tell the story around the brand of like so much of like the hostess with the mostest is like, the folks that look like Martha Stewart and Athena from I Swoon, and I love them, but like I need to see my hands in the shot. I need to like approach it like a Black home. I need to like, if there are products being recommended, they're Black owned products, or they're decor that isn't $17,000 for a block slab. You know what I mean? Like this this is something different. And like we need all of these things to exist, but with while entertaining specifically, it has been so much about not only creating like a physical magazine, but also creating this brand that is aware of Black culture and home, and the ability to talk about us in our homes and talk about our experiences around food and around gathering that isn't attached to a funeral or isn't attached to something traumatic, or, it's just is like, this is this chef, this is what they're cooking at home, this is what they're thinking about, this is what they like to do, this is what this psalm wants to pair with this dish, just because this is the playlist that we're listening to. It just is.
That the playlist, girl. Come on. The center of all Black entertaining is the playlist.
Oh yes, it's a playlist for every season. I love my playlist. If you
show up in a Black household, ain't no music playing, something has gone wrong with the record, with the record player, with the CD player, with the iPod, with the something. And that's a good way to pivot into like your Black joy, like energy in because I get the email marketing. I get your weeklies. I get your weeklies, and I love that focus on Black joy. I think people have gotten I think we started on a really cool trajectory about Black joy. Like Black joy doesn't have to be attached to anything. It doesn't have to be a response to anything. It can just be because it is. And I like how yours just kind of sits in that space. Like, no, it's okay for us to be.
This is what happened this week.
We can be joyful because we're people, and it doesn't have to be connected to it doesn't have to be in response to tragedy or any of those things, which is fine. But it's like for Black joy to exist just independently on its own, because you're a human being and you deserve to have some joy in your life. What has been your most like joyful moments in the last year?
I mean, there's so many. Like you said, that weekly email, I just put a list of things that like brought me joy, and they're little things. I guess it's people, and I won't identify one particular person, but I think the collection of people that have been around me, like one, while I was out in these streets, chucking and jiving and doing like building this business, those people are still present. And then there's a ton of people that I got to meet and really like connect with because we were all in the house and we had nothing to like. There are some friends that I now FaceTime with, but I've never actually met them in person. And I'm like so comfortable with it. So for me, it's the community. It's having like deep laughter in the midst of like serious trauma. Like we are actively living through trauma, and I don't want anybody
considered
to
moving to
forget
Portugal
that.
on a number of occasions in the last week.
Yeah, this last year has been a lot, but it's been those moments of just having someone to call, having someone to laugh with, having someone to talk about nothing with and talk about everything with. I've had no shortage of fantastic people loving on me during this time. So that's been keeping me going.
Is there something in like your personal, like daily ritual that kind of you weren't paying attention to before, but now that we're in this space that you really do take more time with, because you're like, wow, I've been doing this every day and it's become a daily habit, but I didn't realize how much joy this was bringing me. And it's just there every day in the background.
That's a good question. It's hard because pre-pandemic, my home was also my office. Everybody else had to like transition.
You're like, I've been here in this house, so you good.
I was like, I've been in the house. Like I didn't have a commute. My morning routine was pretty like consistent. So I guess it's just like having deep awareness of that routine. While it felt like people around me were trying to like build this routine and this lifestyle, that I was like, oh, this is what I do every day. I wake up, I read my Bible, I Peloton. Pre-pandemic, it was kickboxing. Now that we're in the house, it's Peloton and Tabata. And then I walk my dog. I have a Shiba Inu who she's so luxurious. So I walk with her, and that's always nice and mind clearing, and she's always happy, and she's always like relaxed and chilling and just in the backdrop happy. So that's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
And then just kind of like
I
start my
love
day.
that. I'm just like, I just found like, you know, putting the kettle on and like making a cup of tea or actively making a cup of coffee in my mocha pot, like that kind of like ritualistic, meditative, like each step is the same, but it's, you know, yeah, I just, those moments,
You're looking forward to
girl,
the cup regardless.
I
Yeah. I know what you mean.
like, if there's no creamer in this house, things are not going to work out for anybody. So I need something to be in this house. But just that idea of like that being there every day. It's very grounding and like it centers the day. So yeah, I was just like, okay, Black joy. Like, how are we leaning into that? Like real heavy. What does that look like when we aren't in the house anymore? And like, how can we capture that and like hold on to it as like a center part of the conversation? Like, how are we centering Black joy and like what we're doing going forward? Because it is easy to kind of fall into, especially if you're building something. It's like, oh, okay, you know, you've got you're problem solving all day. And so like, where do you remember to come back to that every single time?
And now we are taking a brief pause to thank Global Cutlery USA for sponsoring this episode of the Afros and Knives podcast. Many people have rediscovered their kitchens over the last year, and some have even rekindled their love for cooking. I hope this is a trend that grows up to become the new normal. Cooking at home can be amazing if you come to your cutting board with curiosity and no apologies, if your pantry and your fridge are well stocked, and if you have a sharp, balanced knife at the ready, like an 8-inch classic chef knife by Global Cutlery, made of Cremova 8 stainless steel. Global Cutlery has been expertly handcrafting knives inspired by the traditions of Japanese sword making, and only using the finest raw materials available. They have been doing this work for over 30 years, and it shows. The knives are for both the home and the commercial cook, and each knife has the signature global edge, and it stays sharper longer. And like the samurai swords before them, each knife is carefully weighted to ensure the perfect balance in your hands. So to purchase your own knife and upgrade that knife game, I'm sure after a year you're ready to make a few replacements. Visit the Global Cutlery website, globalcutleryusa.com, or visit your local kitchen supply store like Sur La Table or Williams-Sonoma. Cooking is a practice and a craft, and every practitioner needs the right tools to produce the beautiful
time.
It's about staying really close to your why.
Can we talk about the
for
why?
For me, there's a lot of joy in my why. Like when I'm really, really stressed or things are hard and I'm problem solving, I'm also jazzed up about that because I know it's like, it's not about me. There's so many people around me that want to see the things that I'm building exist. I was like, ooh, they're going to be hyped that I figured this one out.
And it's
like, wait till I text that random
You're
person.
like, okay, so we're going to solve this problem, and then things are just going to be even doper than it was before. So don't y'all worry about me.
Yeah, I was like on the other side of this thing.
Yeah, that's been, let me tell you. Like the podcast process for me is like when I first started, I had no intentions of really like anyone even listening to it. It was going to be, I don't know why I didn't like really plan for an audience. Like my why was very self-indulgent almost. It was like, I don't know other Black women working in the spaces that I love. And so this is my way of like, this is a gateway for me to get to know them and connect with them and find out about their work. And then as I kept going and I realized by like the 4th interview that people were actually listening, and I was just like, okay, so do I shift my expectations of myself? Do I stay the course? Because that's what's kind of propelled this to begin with. And then like once I got to the end of because I had no plans of getting past the first season either. I was like, I'm gonna do 1 season of this and this is gonna be cool and blah blah blah. And then we got into season 2.
I'm just gonna hang.
Forget that. People were like, hey, you should interview this person. And I was just like, I'm gonna have to do a second season. This is gonna continue. Okay. All right.
But that's encouraging, right? Like when people start having ideas about your business and they start getting invested in it, I'm like, ooh, yeah, I got to tell so-and-so that we're going to try this again.
So it's been like, because I don't discuss it too often because I'm still like working on this that other concept. And so like I started, the podcast was A, to connect with Black women, but B, I needed to, my big macro like goal is to start a digital lifestyle brand, and essentially it's digital media. And so because I'm like, we've watched enough like HGTV and Food Network and stuff to realize there are no Black people in these spaces. When you watch the Travel Channel, I think Anika was like the one Black host on the Travel Channel for a while. And, and eventually the Travel Channel became, a series of like white dudes running around the world trying to find ghosts. And it was like really a glorified Ghostbusters. I was just like, what are we doing with the Travel Channel right now? Why is everything paranormal activity around the world? But I just...
I thought it was just me. Like, I'm so glad you said that specifically because
it was either like, why? Because there was one point where like the Travel Channel was all food media. It was like food content, but it was people eating like oversized hamburgers and trying to eat their weight in fried chicken and like weird stuff like that. And then it just made this weird.
Yeah. They lost their why.
So I was just like watching all of those Discovery Network like shows that were being produced, and I was just like, wow, okay, so all of this is just flat. It's homogenous. Nobody's watching it. You really put like Chopped On in the background because it's 19 hours of it. And you're just like, well, this is going to be in the background of my house, like white noise. And so I'm like, we're not, people aren't engaged in the content. And then Tastemade came around and I was like, okay, so this is beautiful stuff. Like they're doing beautiful work. They're, it's a really diverse type of content pool here. You've got a lot of different talents happening from all over the world. Fantastic. And then about 2 years in, that kind of fell apart. And I was just like, what do you all do? Why aren't you making better choices than this? And then I realized, because you're not willing to tell different stories. You guys want to tell the same stories, but with different faces. And that's not going to work. If you don't invite new stories into the space, like like food media will get stale very quickly. And so I was like, what is the answer to that? So I was like, you know what? I would love to try like to get something going. Cause then once they put like Chef's Table up, I was like, okay, it's a wrap. We need to figure out a way to like capture Black chefs in the same way. There was a thing about the aesthetics of a lot of that stuff. Like it's shot beautifully. So you have these very boring stories and these very homogenous hosts. But the filming is stunning. It's like the light
stunning.
Girl,
I want someone to invite me to host
like, that's
that.
gorgeous. Like, wow, the music choices, like all the creative choices in the execution are fantastic. And then I was like, okay, so I need Black people to be framed in this way. Like Black people deserve to be shot with beautiful lighting and beautiful spaces. They deserve to have gorgeous like voiceovers and fantastic music.
They deserve budget.
So I was just like, okay, how do I do that? How do I answer that? And so like the podcast, I was like, I need to learn the process of production and like putting up content and like actively putting it up consistently every week. What does quality look like over quantity? How do you get both to happen? So all of those things. So it was just like, the podcast was really a way for me to practice for the bigger step. And so now I've added like video this season. And I'm just like, okay, I'm sweating real hard on this video situation because I know what I want it to look like. And so like video is definitely a lot more challenging than audio. Like I figured out audio production probably in 6 months. I like spent a lot of time just like poring over it, reading as much as I could, asking friends. And I had friends who are like professional musicians and producers and stuff. So I had a really great pool of resources to talk to people about like audio engineering and what I need to do and all these other things. And then I added video this season, and I was just like, I was amped at the top. I was like, ooh, we're going to add video because people love to watch Black women talk to each other, and I don't know why. But, adding video, I think, is going to be a great, like, next move here. And then I started recording video, and I was like, oh, okay, so what you did not think about was, like, how are you editing this? What does this look like? What is the final?
Splicing it.
So I'm just, like, at this point, like, okay, that was real. I'm being real ambitious right now, but I think we're just in a window right now for Black people to produce media that we want to see and we want to read and we want to connect with. And And when you were saying like the way you've positioned the magazine and the way the content is built out in the magazine, so you have this mixture of like cookbook and coffee table book and lifestyle magazine and essays and like all of those things in one place. And I think people just underestimated that someone would want that type of like rigorous content in a single publication, as well as like I've been thinking a lot about like cookbooks in general and how people are disconnecting or divorcing the narratives from like actual recipes and cooking. And we have to reassert like that is just as important as like the ingredient list.
Right. Like you've read the story and now here's the recipe. That's kind of how I was thinking about it. So now you're like, like one particular person that did this so well was like Robert Tolan. In this issue, he talks about like reflecting on the relationship of his grandmothers, and he's from a biracial family. So like his experience with his Black grandmother and his experience with his Japanese grandmother. And then you flip and you've got this recipe for Japanese influences in potato salad. So whether or not you're going to make his version of the potato salad, now you're like interested to see like, okay, this came from this grandmother and this ingredient here. And it makes it so much more of like you're attached to food and creativity in that way versus if I just gave you that recipe.
And I feel like it's like, because I've seen the Twitter complaints at least about people like, I have to read all of that before I get to the free recipe. And I'm like, yes, you have to do work to get something for free. It's all that line standing y'all willing to do to pay for something. Like, you can read these, and the thing is, most of them have like the jump to recipe button. So, but that complaint for me, it was like alarming because I was just like, okay, this is how cultures get erased, is because you've decided to divorce the narrative and the history of something from like a actual like tangible product, and it's like, well, it's not important, and I'm just like,
right. And then right there next to that, like right bordering up against it is like, then you have everybody that wants to make their take on somebody else's cultural recipe. And they think that they can do that because society wants to jump to recipe. And they're unmarrying these things that were never supposed to divorce.
Let the people know. Don't be just y'all. I think like, because I'm thinking about like,
I said what I said.
I just to like explain that to people, like, how do you think this, for specifically for Black culture, the way we pass on recipes, the way we record recipes, they weren't written. I mean, we weren't allowed to read or write for a good while. And then when we finally were able to, recipe formatting and trying to figure out how to write a recipe based on all the publishing formats and requirements and things like that, I'm like, that's just not how we engage with our food. If you wanted to learn how to make something, you had to sit in the kitchen, ask your questions and watch. And sometimes you couldn't ask no questions. I know with my great aunt, don't you come in there and ask no questions. You just...
Oh my gosh, the way I used to watch my grandmother make something, I'm like, and I know I followed every single moment, but it didn't hit the same.
I just can look, and I think every Black person I know could nod their head about that and be like, yeah, you right. I just sat in there and watched my grandmother make these biscuits, and I thought I was getting it right.
I did everything she did.
Nope. So for me, like, if you get a recipe from your family member, consider that a historical document. Because I think if we were like, when we were enslaved as people here, we were allowed to record our recipes, they would have been historical documents. You would have gotten a sense of place and time. You would have understood what ingredients were available at the time and the different cooking techniques and things like that. So when we are capturing recipes and like culturally for us, it's history. It's a way to record what's happening at that time and what's available at that time and who's talking at that point. So yeah, I was just like, thank you for like just making sure that those things, I think when someone comes to the magazine, they know that all of those things exist together in relationship when you are engaged with like Black culture. Like all of those things come together. You cannot separate them out. You're never going to get them broken up. So don't try. And I think that's one of the more frustrating things people come up against about trying to duplicate Black culture or appropriate Black culture is they don't understand that you can't just pull a single piece out and use that. You have to use everything. It all comes together as a package. So like, I can see you out here with these cornrows.
You've created a full experience.
But if you never sat between your mom's legs while she cornrowed your hair, you're missing a part of that experience. So, I mean, you can go to your hairstylist and they'll do the technique.
If you haven't been told not to act tender-headed.
You ever been popped with a comb? then you don't understand.
I was like rubbing my like
like,
because I was like,
that's smarts.
If I reach my hand up there,
but then, like all of those things matter. Like the smell of like hair grease, and that when you're that finished product, when you're all done and your hair is like glistening and neat and tidy, and you can go for another week without your mom having to think about washing your hair, all of those things. And I think people think they can just go to their hairstylist and get this hairstyle, and I'm like, yeah, you can absolutely go get a hairstyle, but if you really want to understand, if you really want to wear like cornrows, then you need the full experience. You need to know like what that's like to have those like sensory moments around getting this hairstyle. To have your mother's hands in your hair is, you ain't gonna get that. You ain't gonna get that energy from the hairstylist, y'all. You ain't gonna get that love. You're not gonna get the love and the generosity of spirit. You're not gonna get that care from your hairstylist.
Right. And that's what I'm trying to do with the magazine, is give you these stories and these recipes and these pairings and this playlist with like love and care and packaging, so that like, the things that really do feel like home for me and home for the people that are featured in the magazine can start to either feel like home to you and feel reminiscent, or like at least give you context.
Oh, yeah.
If it's not.
So what you are getting into when you show up in this space.
Because that's where appreciation comes from, I think. It's not just like this aggressive culture that we're in right now that's like diversity, inclusion. We're like throwing Black people into spaces that like those people are not really interested.
Y'all ain't trying to protect the Black people that you threw up in here either. So, no.
Right. Like, I'm not just trying to give you voices. I'm trying to give you history and context and experience and love. Like, I feel like everybody that has been in the magazine so far loves what they do or loves what they're talking about.
Oh yeah, that comes through. That comes through loud and clear. Absolutely. Like, that is crystal clear.
Thank you.
And you've captured like each person in this really beautiful like vignette, and you kind of like froze those moments in time. So like whenever someone in 20 years,
it's timeless.
Yeah, I was like, it's really evergreen. So like in 50 years, if someone was to pick up like that first print edition and read about that person or read what that person wrote or what they contributed, it really is capturing them in this space, and to like look at all the things that are happening around them when they've produced this like really beautiful piece of work. And you're like, wow, they were in the middle of a pandemic. They were in the middle of all these things. And yet they've written this really beautiful piece, or they've produced this gorgeous recipe, and they shared a piece of themselves with us. So that absolutely comes through. Like you did gorgeous work there.
And hopefully they're like, topics that you want to bring to your dinner table too. Like, I didn't just want to have people talk about things or ask people questions that I didn't want you to ask at your own dinner table, because we've all been inside for a year. If you're sitting down with someone and you don't know what to talk about, I mean, I love like Khaleesa Marie Martin's piece about like having to separate her identity from like who she is as a human and what she does for work, and finding value in those things as separate entities. And that was me at the beginning of the pandemic. I was like, yeah, I'm an event planner.
There are no events. So I have to.
So, and it's a really important exercise, that. So hopefully there's a topic or something in there for everyone to relate to.
That's
whether they're in the kitchen or on the couch or whatever it is.
I mean, if you don't find something, it's because you weren't looking. Like, let's be real. Like, it's there. It's there. But honestly, you don't have to go on a scavenger hunt to find it. And I think you can.
I appreciate you.
You can come, and the thing is, you can come to the work without it being like filtered in color either. It's like, okay, you have to be a Black person to understand what it's like to like share a meal. Like, there are very human themes here that
there are human themes here: family, identity, comfort in the workplace, kindness.
Like, what are you looking for? And I think because people want to always frame things as a Black person, it's like you might as well just throw that on as a caveat. It's like, oh, but as a Black person, I'm like, but you guys treat Black like it's a really different species. And this is where we keep bumping into this problem, is that we aren't a different species. We are the same species. So we have families and dinners, and we eat, and we do all the things that you all do. Like, I've been reading Black, White, and the Gray, and
oh yes,
that shows up big time, especially at the top of the in the first half of the book, where they have that, Mashama and Jono have that first conversation, that first meeting, and he is kind of like struck by the fact that they shared so much in common, and he really didn't expect to share anything in common with this Black woman. And I'm like, but she's a person. So what do you mean? Like, our grandmothers made the same thing. They used like, braised pork. I'm just like, how is that? Okay. Okay, that's fine. But
revelation is a beautiful thing.
And I think it's because we have always had to sit in the position of taking your culture and making it culture. And our culture kind of gets put off to the side, and it's othered and kind of marginal, and it's definitely marginalized. And so it's like, well, because you're the central culture, you're the default culture, it's kind of like, oh, we didn't think you did the same things we did. I'm like, but if you're the central culture, then everybody's doing what you guys do. So I don't think you know how that works either. I'm confused as to why you're surprised that we're all wearing the same clothes and eating the same food, because you've put yourself in the middle. Anyway, so
that's a whole other podcast.
Like, again, that's a whole nother episode. So for like the future, because I when I was reading the magazine, I was like, okay, so she gonna end up having like, advertisers show up. They're gonna be like Crate and Barrel, gonna be a couple of others popping in there. She gonna be like probably developing a line of like dinnerware and like serviceware, which I'm all about and I'm all for it. I really want that for you. But I really want that for us too. I want to be able to go into a Crate and Barrel and be like,
I want that for us too.
I need these spoons and these forks and this serving bowl, and I need all of these things from this collection. So like, where do you want your brand to go? Like, how big do you see this going, and how, at what point do you feel like you can go, okay, I'm going to kind of step back and like, start some new projects, and where's that? What's that moment for you where okay, the brand is like ready to kind of be autonomous and live in its own way?
Oh, that's a lofty question.
We can just spitball a little bit and see what happens.
So what I immediately go to is something that somebody told me when I started my first business, To Be Hosted. I had this dinner party, and then there were like people that came to the dinner party that were like, oh my gosh, I have so many great ideas for you. We should meet up. And like, I had them at my apartment and had dinner with them. And one of the guys that came over, this was like so New York, so like unafraid. I didn't know these people, but like they were like showing up to give me free advice. And they said, this gentleman, Kevin, he said the thing that has changed my thinking. And he said, you need to think about your business in 3 stages: the dog, the horse, and the dragon. And I don't know where this comes from exactly, and I've never even Googled it, but the way he explained it to me was that you need to learn how to walk your dog and have a properly trained dog before you learn how to ride a horse. And then you need to learn how to ride a horse before you go and slay your dragon. So as you ideate and you think of all of these different ideas, those ideas need to go underneath the dog, horse, and dragon of it all. Good. So for me, that was like training my dog, and actually literally having a dog at the time that I launched To Be Hosted, having a puppy she was wild. Was like, okay, I need to be able to do these dinner parties and do them really well. And then the horse was being able to do them for brands and take on all these clients. And then I added in the magazine. So I'm not yet at my dragon, because I feel like there are things I want to perfect about the magazine. I want to bring in more creatives and bring in more writers and bring in more minds to touch that project. Of course, that comes with budget and sponsor willingness. Yes. Sponsor willingness comes with like the amount of magazines that I'm able to sell. So like for me, you're like, I'm thinking about like, how am I going to maximize the number of magazines that I sell? I'm very grassroots. I'm not super famous, but I want, while entertaining, in 1 million households.
Yes. Y'all,
so
you
how
hear this
am I
number?
Going to get one? That sounds crazy.
Not at all.
Not
at all. When you think about the circulation for some garbage magazines we keep seeing, no, not at all. 1 million households? Come on here.
1 million households. And that will, that'll help me grow my team. That'll help me, the people that are in the magazines also have this be a revenue driver for them, or like just at least a source of income and compensation or what have you. So I want us to have that first.
Okay.
So I feel like I really need to sit in the magazine of it all and scale this thing so that it can be an independent magazine that does the numbers and exists. It exists in print for as long as possible. So yeah, I feel like I want to sit there first. I think about ownership a lot. So I think about like having to be hosted as a venue and having that be like a place of, one, being able to host dinners, but two, other people that are in food and in spirits that want to shoot content. They're coming to be hosted.
It's true. Oh yeah.
See what I did there? So I want to have a venue. I want to have ownership. I want to have a place to produce the content for the magazine. I want the content for the magazine to get even better. I think that's the cool thing about the magazine is that the theme changes each year. So I have a lot of theme ideas and a lot of stories and angles to tell and tell really well first before I think about the cutlery line. The cutlery line will come.
So we need a to-be hosted cutlery line in the Target as well. So we want a high end and a more economical version of all of that when the time comes. So.
Yes, exactly. Right. So all of that I think is coming. I think about working on like a wall entertaining book also. Which this is very privileged information.
I was like, whoa.
But wanting, the coffee table book. Like when you think about it, y'all let Martha Stewart have 100 books on entertainment.
She got the whole thing.
So I just want one. I would just give y'all one that has, just like the basics and the love and all of the things and art, take the book and dip it in culture. And so you have that, and then you have your more like recurring magazine thing coming.
I love that.
That's where I am right now.
And this is is this still under the training your dog, or is this in the horse stage?
This is the horse.
Okay. Because I need to start looking at my whole life this way now. I'm like, wait a minute, which one of these is the dog and the horse? Okay. I think I am like now getting into like this dog is trained with the podcast and
the podcast is trained and now has video. I was thinking it when you said it. I was like, okay. And then the dragon is the network.
I was like, the dragon's the network. You're right. Because it was, I think, who was it? Therese Nelson had reached out to me last night and she was like, how are things and how are you doing? And I'm just like, I've been sitting here looking at this dragon because like the dragon showed up 4 years before the dog. And I think that's been been the problem is like the dragon has had to wait. And I told her, I was just like, there's just so many things. And I just, there are things I really am like that feel pressing at this point. And I'm like really trying to put that into a better bucket. I'm like, I'm not pressed for this right now. The timing is the timing and like chill.
The timing is the timing. And like, the entertaining person in me is like, you want to have your house in order before people come over.
And that was me. I was like, anytime I felt like I was jumping the gun, I was like, girl, but this house is raggedy. So calm down. You need to run the vacuum. You need to get
Did you remember to clean the bathroom?
The Swiffer need to be out. You ain't got a new roll of toilet paper on or nothing. You're doing too much. And of course I always like I'm always thinking about those things like, well, wait a minute. So like all these people ended up like, I want to see things like Architectural Digest, but I need those cameras to be in like Black homes. I want to know, like, I've been obsessed with finding, okay, so who's out here like designing carpet and, and like wall colors and tiles and like what Black businesses are doing that work.
My goodness. Black Artists and Designers Guild. Badge. I think they're Badge or Badge Guild on Instagram. Obsessed with them. Like I just see all these Black designers and it's just like, ooh, wait till y'all design my future to be hosted space.
Like, okay. That's
like, there's no excuse anymore for people to be like, oh, I don't know where to find such. I was like, you can find them and they out here doing the thing and you missed the memo. It's not us, it's y'all.
And I've been watching some there is a series on YouTube from the House Beautiful magazine, and they're one of their I think their VP of marketing is this Black woman, and she is such a fantastic host. And so she's done like 2 or 3 series for them. One was on these like fantastic kitchens. So she'll go into someone's home and talk to the designer and the architect, and she's just so at home. like in what she's doing, and she's like this. And for me, when you look at her, you're like, no, she there's no like she ain't like ambiguously ethnic. She's not like, no, she is this beautiful chocolate brown woman with her hair just kind of pulled back in a French braid. It looked like it just makes it blow out too. So it's not like this like overly pressed and processed hair. And, she didn't pull her little natural back into like this really beautiful, like, French braid. And, it's just this gleaming, gorgeous skin and this and she looks like a Black woman. Like there's no misrepresenting that. Like you're not confused about her. You're not asking what her background is or anything weird. And she's just so at home in all of these stunning spaces. And you're just like, and every single person she has talked to, all of the architects, all of the homeowners are all white. And it's just like her showing up and like creating all of this presence and energy in these homes. And I'm just like moved every time I watch her. And so she's done like the kitchen series. She has 2 where she has hosted I guess House Beautiful did like these 2 dream home projects. And so one was in Nashville and they just brought together a collection of different artists and artisans and designers to design a single room in these really huge houses. And so they're on their second project, which is in Colorado. And she's brought in like, the first house was like, they brought in a couple of like Black architects and Black designers for like a couple of rooms. She did the same thing with this as well. And I'm just kind of like, she's so impressive. I think that's like the only word I can use. I'm like, she's so impressive. And I'm just like, yes, can I get more of this? Like, why isn't HGTV like doing that? Like, what are y'all, can you give me a break here?
There's no shortage of talent.
None. And she's just graceful. And you can tell like there's really no like code switching. It's just who she is and how she like speaks and presents herself. And it just feels good. It feels so good to watch. And I'm like excited to see like Black designers and architects and interior designers like really start to emerge at this point. Like I want all the things. I want tablecloths and napkins. I want like silverware and ceramics,
wallpaper, textiles,
all of these things. And like I really am looking forward to like that day where you're kind of like, oh, we're going to do one of these house projects and everyone participating in that project is, a Black owned business or a Black designer or a Black architect. Like I think those types of things are like the things I'm itching to produce, which is why like that dragon is sitting there looking at me, cross-eyed, because I have these ideas. I'm just like, how can I get these?
But everything you're doing is to get you to slay the dragon.
For real. So the people, if they want, because we need to get this magazine into 1 million homes. So how can we do that? How can we that goal? And where should we follow you? Because some people are like, don't follow me on my personal Instagram. I'm not going to answer no questions.
Oh yeah, that's me 1000%. If you want to talk to me, if you want to see my work, if you want to see what I'm cooking or what I'm styling, you can find me at While Entertaining, or you can find me at To Be Hosted.
All right, y'all. Okay, I don't know. My parents call it the weirdest times. I'm like, y'all, when I say I'm in the middle of something, that's what I mean. I'm in the middle of something. All right, so To Be Hosted and While Entertaining. Y'all don't be chasing her down on her personal Instagram. She ain't gonna answer no questions. She got nothing for you over there. And to buy the magazine and to get the back issue of the digital one, the digital edition as well. Okay.
Yes, please. It's www. That was probably too many W's. You know how many W's should be there. WhileEntertaining.com.
What you need to do is like, because we can do either a single magazine subscription in each home, or you can do 2 magazine subscriptions in like 500,000 homes. So however y'all want to do that math is what I need. Y'all need to just go gift it to someone, like get a copy for yourself and buy a copy as a gift. Get subscribe.
And tell me what you think.
Just come on. The feedback helps. And then, and if you are not signed up for these weekly emails, you make them poor choices.
Yeah, that link is on our Instagram. I send every Friday. Every Friday, Joy comes in the morning. I send a Joy email.
Joy in that inbox. Because I'm sure there's other craziness in your inbox right now, like your Amazon receipts and some emails from your boss that you ain't trying to talk to. So you might as well get something you really want to read.
Joy.
It's email. Because I don't know what other poor choices you're making right now, but this should not be one of them. So go ahead. It's real simple, y'all. It just requires an email address and just stop playing. just, just people be like, but what about? I'm like, don't give me these excuses. What do you mean?
I won't spam you. I only send you emails on Fridays.
Like, because quite frankly, nobody wants to talk to you outside of that anyway. So it's like, just get the email. So yes, thank you.
And people write me back, and I do write them back. They be acting surprised. I'm like, I'm a regular
I'm just
person.
like, yes, this is not a bot, and it's a real person creating this email. So please don't be weird. Like maybe we retired that type of weird in 2021. Like, stop being that kind of weird. I don't mind other types of weird, but that kind of weird, I can't. Well, thank you so much. I mean,
Thank
we
you.
definitely we are passing ships a lot of the times. So I was like, I need to like sit in front of this person and like pick her brain and learn about her whole life. And I appreciate
Thank you
doing that for me today. So, let me hit this stop button because I never do. And then 3 hours go by and they'll be like, do you want all of this recorded? I was like, oh no.